Hello, my name's Ed Frawley. I own Leerburg. This is a video that I filmed a number of years ago with our friend Michael Ellis out in California. Michael's one of the best dog trainers out there. And in this video, he's going to talk about the difference between an active dog versus a reactive dog. And he talks a little bit about how operant conditioning really is talking about an active dog. And basically, if you've been involved in dog training for any period of time, we think of an active dog or an operant dog as a dog that knows the behavior. You take him out and you ask him to do something, or he thinks you're going to want to ask him to do something, and he starts offering behaviors. You haven't asked him to do anything, and he'll, like in obedience, he'll sit. My dogs, they'll sit, they'll lay down. My little dogs, I made the mistake in the beginning of teaching Rosie, my Shih Tzu, to lay down, and I accidentally rewarded her once when she laid down and shook her feet like that. And I rewarded her, and to this day, when I ask her to lay down, she'll lay down and shake her feet. It's cute, but that's an active dog. And what Michael's going to do in this video is talk about the difference between active dogs in protection work versus the difference between them and reactive dogs in protection work. He really explains it well. This is a really good video. And if you like it, we just released a seminar that I filmed a number of years ago here at Leerburg at our training facility on protection training. And we're about to release some new video on training that we filmed a number of years ago that's also excellent. This video came out of, the video you're about to watch, came out of the video we're going to release, or the online course we're going to release in the coming months.
Operant dog. So I sort of sometimes use that interchangeably with what I call, the term that I use most frequently, my term is active dog. But we're talking about the same thing. So an operant dog, we usually use that when we're referring to obedience behaviors. But generally, we're talking about a dog that understands, has made the connection between their behavior and the environment, and what happens in the environment. And me being a key piece of the environment, or the decoy being a key piece of their environment. So it's a dog that knows that their behavior is making things happen, right? So in obedience, we look at it like a dog that once we teach the dog to sit and down and stand and bark and different things, if we don't reward the dog quickly for a behavior, they'll start offering other behaviors, right? They'll sit, then they'll down, they'll bark at you, they'll hit you with their foot. They're trying to figure out what behavior they need to perform to make this happen for them. In protection, we have the same kind of concept, a dog that makes connections between their behaviors and what happens with the decoy. So they bark, the decoy moves. They bark, the decoy moves. And pretty soon they think that they're doing that. So they'll be very persistent in offering a behavior in an attempt to get a reaction from their environment. And operant, in the true sense of the word, goes both ways, right? It's not only the dog that understands that their behavior can get them something, but it understands that there's consequences for their behavior, and so they learn to avoid certain situations because they've made connections between their behavior and a punisher of some kind as well. So operant isn't strictly a reward-based term. It goes both directions. But in terms of when I say operant, when I'm talking about the stuff we're going to be, for the purposes of this class, I'm basically talking about on our list the active dog. And that's that dog that comes out and he knows his behavior can trigger something happening. It's like in Schutzhund, we frequently see a dog that'll come out and bark at the blind to make the helper come out of the blind, right? So he knows that his behavior, if he focuses his energy on that blind, he can make this guy appear. So there's a decoy that he doesn't see, but he knows that his behavior can make that guy come out. And he's actively trying to figure out what he has to do to get to it. And then it's the same thing in the dog's biting styles. As a decoy, we respond when the dog digs in or shakes or fights in some fashion, and that reinforces that behavior. So that dog is going to offer that behavior more frequently in an attempt to make me react. And he's made connections between his behavior and that happening. And he thinks he's making it happen with his behavior. And that's the active dog that we're gunning for. The reactive dog is in obedience or in protection, is a dog that waits for a set of obvious stimuli from the decoy or from the handler to begin to go into drive or to begin to offer behavior. So you see that some dog comes out, the helper steps out, the dog doesn't look at it, he's just do-do-do-do-do. The helper makes threat and the dog activates. Right? The dog says, ooh, this guy's coming and making threat at me, like in defensive aggression. And that's a reactive form of aggression. Defensive aggression is a reactive form of aggression. It's not an active form. Dogs don't go out and actively put defense out into the world. What happens is they've learned triggers from it. This guy's threatening. He stared at me too much. He lifted the stick and came at me. He did something that made me feel threatened, and it's a responsive reactive form of aggression. So it's one of the difficult things for us in terms of how we use that, because most of what we want the dogs to do in police work and in dog sports anyway, outside of personal protection circles, most of what we want the dogs to do is actively go out and seek something, right? So let's Schutzen, for example. You step onto the field in obedience. You make your dog run around a series of blinds, and he has to come into a blind and bark at a passive person. There's no defensive stimuli here at all. Right? The dog goes from obedience, searching behavior, to barking at somebody that's passive. Right? So if a dog's worked a lot in defense, he doesn't see the need and doesn't want to actually engage somebody until he feels that he has to, threatened. Right? And again, remember, defensive aggression is always, to some degree, playing with some fear-based stuff or unease on the dog's part. Right? So it's not something that they want to go and confront. They feel they have to, and when they relieve, if their aggressive response relieves that pressure, that makes them happy. So the way to reward defensive aggression is for the dog to win, to drive off the threat, or that sort of thing, right? So in what we want the dogs to do, we want the dogs to actively fight with the guy, frequently for extended periods of time. So defensive aggression has very little place in that world because of it. And those dogs tend to be reactive. And we have the same dog in obedience. The reactive dog in obedience is the dog that comes out and is not paying any attention to their handler. The handler whips out a ball, waves the ball in the dog's face, and off they go, right? And now the dog's paying attention, but the object itself is what drove that set of behaviors. The dog didn't come out and drive the handler to make those things happen. In protection, we just want to flip that. We want to make the dog drive the helper with their behavior, drive the decoy with their behavior, instead of react exclusively to what the decoy is doing. And then we show them, and every dog starts out in obedience or in protection as a reactive dog. There's no reason for them to come out and pay attention to the helper. We show them that there is. And then the dog starts to recognize signs. Hey, this is one of the places where that guy comes out. And oh, look, there he is. He's dressed like this. And oh, he moves like this. And next thing you know, they're actively coming into drive or barking or whatever it is as they come out. They're recognizing the signals, and they become pushier and pushier and more active and more active. And ideally, and again, because the dog that's active is much easier to teach in both obedience and protection, we want to create that state of mind as much as possible. And then those dogs also need less help from the handler or the decoy to start performing behaviors. Right? So one of the key problems that we have is we start with a reactive dog. We show the dog a set of circumstances that means we're going to do bite work, and we hope the dog starts offering behavior on their own, coming out, looking for the guy, starting to bark right away, all these things that we want the dog to do. And in the beginning, of course, we have to help the dog. So when I'm teaching a young dog to bark, I come out, I make some attraction, I run around, I stop, I get him to bark, I run again, and I'm doing a lot of the making energy for this behavior. I'm helping the dog get involved. And of course, we want to, like any kind of help we're using in any of our training, we want to wean the dog off help as we go. Right? So the more active the dog, the more passive I can be until the dog is supplying most of the energy. And we can get stuck. So if I help the dog too much for too long, then the dog stays in that reactive state, becomes stuck, and doesn't go into drive or doesn't perform behaviors unless I'm making some kind of attraction. So we see this all the time. Dogs that bark, in Schutzen for instance, dogs that bark really well in the blind, as long as somebody's making confrontation, staring at them, making some noise, cracking a whip, doing things like that. Now the dogs are all on fire, they're barking beautifully. Then the guy stands in there and just kind of stares off into space and doesn't do anything, and your dog goes, woof, woof, woof. What? There's nothing happening here, right? And that's, the dog hasn't made the transition completely from the reactive to the active state, where he can bark at something passive, knowing that his behavior will eventually make a reaction. right? And so what we do is we initially stimulate the dog, and then we go passive, and we make the dog's behavior reactivate us again as a decoy. So on our sheet, we have the concept of the decoy as actor, right? And I talked a little bit about that yesterday, but it's a big part of what you do as a training decoy. A training helper, a training decoy, your job is an actor. You have to respond to what the dog's doing. And the dog has to think that his behavior is making those things happen.
So if you're interested in watching and learning more from Michael Ellis and what we offer here at Leerburg, we have a lot of videos we did with Michael, but we just recently released a protection seminar, training seminar, that we did and filmed here at Leerburg a number of years ago. We'll put the web address at the end of this video. And we are also about to release some additional protection online courses that we filmed a number of years ago with Michael. And we'll do some videos that introduce that. And if you want to sign up for our newsletter, we send a newsletter out 2 times a week, and we announce these new videos in the newsletter. So there's also sales every single week here at Leerburg.